Nick Brodnicki is the executive director, as Tom said, of the Oregon and Southwest Washington American Heart Association. A teacher by training and student at heart, Nick has spent years developing programs around nutrition, exercise, blood pressure, tobacco control, and mental well-being, both in community settings for youth and adults and in large corporate settings for small teams and international organizations. All of the work Nick does has health equity as his North Star. Nick's background includes, we were just talking, a BA in education and a master's of library and information science. While he hails from Buffalo, New York, he has spent extended periods of time living in Virginia and California. Now he calls Portland home for about the last couple of years. Fun fact about Nick, he raced 4 years as a professional triathlete. Note that. Physique. Please join me in offering a warm East Portland Rotary welcome to Nick Brodnicki.
Good positioning. We got the camera there. Strategically keep my notes out of sight of everybody.
Yeah.
Most of the jokes have been covered with the wine portion of this discussion, and I will inappropriately set my phone up as a timer. I gotta say it out loud because we haven't had a lot of practice at this the last couple of years, and whew, you get the nerves out that way. But really poor jokes aside and self-effacing humor, I really do appreciate the introduction by Kelly. We've had the opportunity to connect with each other just in the last couple of months. He gave me a really warm welcome as one person working for a large healthcare focused institution in the region to another who really tries to support the work that he and his teams do. And then so many of you as Rotarians and your volunteer service and community acts support. So let's get started with the topic of the day, if you will. Some of you may have read what I'm here to talk about, not the wine as much, but maybe some of you haven't seen the agenda. So I wrote in the description that I asked you actively advocate for your health or the health of those closest to you. And what does that even look, sound, or feel like? I'd love to approach that from a personal perspective and then an American Heart Association perspective. And hopefully we have a couple of questions that come along with that as we work through this. And as I dive in here, please feel free to interrupt me if you feel like it doesn't bother me at all with a question, if there's something you'd like me to lean into. The personal story side gets pretty intense, just to be honest with you. Kelly brought up in the introduction there that I was a professional athlete. And, when you're a professional athlete, there's expectations. I wasn't an NFL football player. I didn't, play for the Blazers, but I had a platform to stand on. I had a responsibility because I stood on a stage with USA Triathlon, and I thought about that deeply based on the teaching background and that library information science education that I had. And I used to think a lot about giving back. What does that even mean? Honestly, community service, right? Okay, you give back in the community, clean some stuff up, read to some kids. By the way, hi to everybody online. I'm looking at you and waving at you, but I just want to say that, getting used to the hybrid environments when I present. So I am 4 years a professional athlete, and I got paid to sweat and lycra and spandex. Not everybody probably feels like that's a fun thing, but for me, I was like, this is great. I followed the brains of the operation around the country. My partner, very, very, very good at what she does. And when she had an opportunity, we followed that opportunity. And I was like, that's great. I can sweat on my bike and go for runs wherever we live. So I was really enjoying my identity. I was enjoying advocating for keeping people moving as best I could. And we eventually moved a couple spots and found ourselves in California. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, I'm in this tech land of promise. I have this education, you know, maybe it's time to start looking to something beyond what I'm doing right now. Maybe I'll go get another job. Maybe I won't race anymore. I had this identity that I needed to transform completely. And I got another job and I stopped racing professionally. And I didn't stop training, but I stopped racing professionally. It's a big piece of who I am. It's how I advocated for myself. I thought about, you know, if you're going to go do something else, you got to do something for yourself. You're going to go for a run, right? It's good for you. The Heart Association says it's good for you. I learned that later on, right? Exercise minutes. I was a social studies teacher, not a gym teacher or anything like that. So I didn't really know all the requirements for kids as I was, you know, going through my education. But I'm out for a run one day, and I'm about 3 miles from home. I don't carry a phone with me because I'm an intelligent young man. I don't need to call anybody ever. I'm good to go. I'm strong. Never had an issue on a run. And then I was on the ground. I was no longer running. And then I was crawling because I had no one to call. And it was about 5:30 in the morning when a normal person runs. And it was about 3 miles, remind you, from home. It was a long crawl to get home. Just want to be clear. If anybody's ever done that, keep it to yourself. No one really wants to hear about it, except in like this setting very briefly. Yeah, I crawled just about the whole 3 miles home. My wife, oh, and by the way, my in-laws, who are also visiting us on vacation, were like, what's wrong with you? We've been calling you. You don't have your phone on you. You know, like, what happened? And I said, I don't know. My chest, I can't breathe. My chest hurts. I thought maybe I pulled a rib, like I twisted something, right? I wasn't doing intervals, but like weird things happen to athletes. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit because we got a lot of things to talk about. I'm in a hospital on a cardiac wing with the assumption of them having right side heart failure in the next couple of minutes because I end up having about 3 dozen pulmonary embolisms per lung. Both lungs collapsed and under 10% lung function. And the sac that your lungs sit in, there was a tear in it because of how hard the breathing was because of the clots, and the whole thing filled with fluid. So they get me on a cardiac wing because my heart is working so hard. My oxygen level is so low. I can barely see. I can barely talk. I sure as heck can't walk anymore. And the pain is so intense that just okay to speak. So I'm on a morphine drip. I'm on a chest tube. And I'm sitting in this bed thinking, well, not an athlete anymore. How do I do anything? How do I live my life? This is me. This is what I advocate for. I want people to move. I want to go sweat. That isn't happening. Obviously, I recovered and I'm doing okay. I have severely limited lung function these days, and the doctors don't know what happened to me, but I didn't have a cardiac arrest and I didn't have heart failure because of the shape I was in, because I advocated for myself and I took care of my cardiac health. Now that also carries over to a lot of other pieces of health, my mental well-being, cholesterol, blood sugar, I mean, you name it, all those sorts of things. I advocated for myself without realizing I was even doing it in that manner the whole time. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of folks in the world. It disproportionately affects women. It disproportionately affects minorities. I'm a white cis male. I'm good to go. I don't have it, like, no. And it's not even cardiovascular disease that they think affected me, but I automatically got put into that camp because of the stress on my heart now. And, you know, all the biological things that I don't touch when it comes to the science for heart health that I couldn't possibly explain to you. So please don't ask me those questions. But all those pieces, right, to the puzzle. But I had been, unbeknownst to me, the entire time advocating for myself. So when I think about why I'm here and why I have the opportunity to have a discussion with fine folks like yourself, representing your community, giving back in your community, creating opportunities for folks like myself to speak to the community, the first thing I say is that I'm honored now to represent the Heart Association in this capacity. I first show up as an individual, a person, a human being, Nick Brodnicki, he, him pronouns, you know, who advocates for folks to move, do what you can to take care of yourself. But I also have the privilege now to share on behalf of the Heart Association, and have done so for 4+ years at this point. In my current role as executive director, I have the opportunity to oversee basically everything that we do between Oregon and Southwest Washington, government relations to community impact projects to our fundraising initiatives. You name it, someone's got to report to me about it. I have a special place in my heart when it comes for all of the pieces that talk about advocating for someone else. Because, you know, when I'm in the hospital, I think about how my partner advocated for me. And I think about how I've had the opportunity then to talk to kids in schools, to advocate for themselves, their parents, their caregivers, the folks in their community, and how maybe cultural barriers might disadvantage some from taking some of those advocacy actions because they're scared or they don't know how to approach it, or there's a lot of power structures that stop them from being able to for a long time. So because I don't have this sort of stuff memorized, I wanted to just list off a couple of the things when I talk about advocating around Oregon and Southwest Washington that the American Heart Association has the privilege to be a part of. And by proxy, now I do too. So we have had the opportunity to equip Multnomah County health clinics with hundreds of blood pressure cuffs. You know, there's a lot of folks who don't feel comfortable going into a clinic, even if it's free, and everybody there might even look like them. They don't necessarily, but even the folks looks like them. It's a scary situation for a lot of people. So what we try to do is outfit all of these outreach specialists, all of these nurses with blood pressure cuffs, so folks can take them home and they can start to monitor their own blood pressure. They can advocate for themselves. Knowing your blood pressure number is one of the lowest barriers to taking care of your cardiac health, especially if you're someone taking care of a lot of other, maybe younger folks in the household and their cardiac health, right? So there's some advocacy efforts. We've worked with a number of childcare facilities and places that generally K-12 environment and younger to provide hands-on-knee CPR training kits, because CPR, easiest way, knowing CPR yourself, easiest way to advocate for someone's health in a critical moment, in a crowd, in a work situation, in a family situation, especially when it comes to young people and folks who identify and show as female, because a lot of people are really scared to give CPR to a female or a young person. They don't want to hurt them. They don't want to break something. It's really hard to break people, to be honest with you. Doing hands-only CPR, you're not as strong as you think you are, just to be fair. You know, there's an opportunity for advocacy. We have these programs where we work with institutions around town, be it health clinics, be it school districts, be it other different types of institutions, where we help them screen folks as a part of intake processes for social determinants of health to look at if they are food insecure. And for anyone who isn't as familiar with the concept of social determinants of health, thinking about, you know, where you grew up, your access to education, to healthcare, to food, to childcare, think about zip codes, generally speaking, will tell you about what that person's social determinants will look like for their health in the future. Someone in East County, Multnomah versus maybe downtown, maybe you know, North Portland, where I live right now. So we've had the opportunity to advocate for a lot of folks, for these families, where we are able to provide them with training to screen, and then we move them, because the Heart Association doesn't focus on the food security part, we focus on the nutrition security part. So once someone screens as food insecure, they can be put in a system and a pipeline that helps them get the nutrition they need. And we advocate for them to get the sustenance that they need to be able to support themselves and their family. Another little advocacy piece there. And then one more to add into that mix, because this is more of a tried and true Heart Association program. Some folks may have heard of this if you have any framing with healthcare. So we have this program called Target Blood Pressure, Target BP, and we work with clinical systems so that all of their data gets aggregated and it gets run through all of our AHA science-backed systems to be able to look at, are these people's hypertension rates going down? Cardiac health, hypertension, number one, sounds terrible every time I say it out loud. Number one killer of people. Okay, killers, like, sounds like a bad horror movie. But we want change. So we set up these systems, all these science-based systems to advocate for these folks then. And those are some of the things on that local regional level, right? And I've been fortunate to be in my position since January. So I've been a little bit part of some of those, or I've worked on them in other places. I'm speaking to some of the things that we do here. We zoom out for a second. The Heart Association, this number always gets me. We've given out over $10 million in long COVID grants at this point, studying the effects of long COVID on folks' cardiac health. No one has a clue what long COVID looks like truly long COVID right now. So we're like, we gotta get ahead of this. If cardiovascular disease is already diminishing so many lives, what's COVID gonna do coupled with that? So we're a big piece of that around the nation. And we're gonna roll out, so this is statewide, we're gonna roll out this initiative in probably January or February, where we're working with the University of Oregon to work on both COVID screenings for generally migrant farm workers, the communities as a whole, not just the farm workers themselves. But we're going to be screening those folks. We're going to be working on COVID screenings for them and couple that with that food insecurity screening to be able to create these pipelines where there might be somewhere that this person can go to, but there's no one to advocate for them. They might not be able to get there physically. They might not be able to realize there might be a language barrier, cultural barrier. So we're setting up this system with the University of Oregon it'll start in about 10 counties and it'll expand to about 19 counties, where we're partnering with them on all these screenings and then making sure that there's real dollars behind a system change for all of these folks. You know, Kelly said that health equity is at my core. It's the balance of everything I'm trying to do when I lead a team, and then when I create a strategic relationship with someone in the region that we're trying to aim at. And health equity, let's do those. Everybody loves the definition, right? The concept of health equity, the concept of just access for everyone, that equity piece being specifically targeting folks who have historically not had access or been directly denied access, because there's levels to that, right? Like, I'm going to get a lot of access because of the way I look. There's a lot of people who won't get a lot of access because of the way they look or the neighborhood they live in. So we're approaching that and we're trying to take that full system approach, right? And work on that environment for everybody. So a little bit of a circuitous path there. I want to give you an example of bringing someone into the fold who has taught me so much about that next level of advocacy, and that is, I'm just going to call him John, this gentleman who joined a leadership team of ours. And John got an introduction from somebody else, and he was like, yeah, I mean, heart health's important to me. It's important to everybody. Yes, John, yeah, HA mission, right? Longer, healthier lives for all of us. It's like, you know, what about this though? Has it touched your life? I mean, we all kind of have a story or two. I don't want to pry too much, but like you've taken a conversation with me. And he goes, you know, Nick, I have been an executive for years. I have shared the stage with tons of people. I have given tons of talks. I have represented the organizations that I've worked for across every manner of industry you can imagine. He goes, for a long time, I was able to do that with my best friend. Okay, he's speaking in the past tense. This isn't going to be good. He told me about a conference they were at 5 years ago at this point. Him and his best friend on stage. Big rah-rah speech, right? Big conference, thousands of people out there in the crowd. And he turns to his friend, to a little tag team effect here. Like, you're up next. Toss the mic. He's down on the ground. He's having a stroke. couple folks in the room understood the concept of FAST. If anybody's not familiar, like face drooping, arm, speech slurred, time to call 911. And they tried to get him help as quickly as possible. It wasn't fast enough, and frankly, it didn't really matter. His time was up. Unbeknownst to his best friend, he had not shown up to doctor's appointments for the last couple of years. Had a pride that kind of kept him away from that. He wasn't able to advocate for his friend. He didn't think to talk about something like that. I mean, where you're like, hey, you go to your doctor lately? How's that going? How's your heart health? Like, come on. When are you having that conversation with most people, even with your family members, right? But from that moment on, he was like, I have a mission. Besides doing the best job I can for my teams and my family, I want people to know I'm an advocate for you. I care about your longevity because I want you in my life for a long time. So when I get the opportunity to stand on a stage like this, put lifts in my shoes. When I get an opportunity to stand on a stage like this, I think about what it looks, sounds, and feels like to advocate for folks. And these are just a couple examples that I'm familiar with that the Heart Association likes to, sink its teeth into. And when I want to give a takeaway, because I was like, all right, this is good, right? I care about stuff. I don't want my friends to die, my family members, right? What do I do next? What do I do next? Well, I mean, of course, go see a physician, go see a doctor. That's good advice across the board, right? Get your body moving, eat the salad that was out there today. I was not inspecting anyone's plate, but eat that salad. That's good for you too. It's a good AHA physician. But I also think, how do you think about your time? We've probably all heard that adage, you will spend time on the things you care about. You will make time for the things that matter to you. How many times have you said, I don't have time, right? Does it matter to you then? You didn't make it the priority. How can just like a tiny bit of that advocacy for your heart and your brain health, how can that be a part of that advocacy effort for you? What do you spend your time on as a Rotarian, right? When you're in the community, when you're doing some of those acts of service, when you're here in these meetings, how can you do that? How can you just add that little itty bitty thing to make it part of the daily habit, if you will? So that's a little bit about that takeaway. I want you to just think about that just a little bit, try and implement something just tiny into what you do. The Heart Association would like you to. I would personally like you to do that, because I'll close with with another really brief personal story, and then just a proverb that I absolutely love. Maybe a few of you have heard. So I had a father, it's past tense, who made some reasonably poor choices in his life that affected his heart health in a pretty adverse way. And I lost him. He's not with us here today. And I think about when I was younger, if I would have known a little bit better or had someone advocating for me to help advocate for him, maybe he'd be here today. Think about that person in your life, that coworker, that pet, someone in this room right here, where you're like, God, I'd like this person to be around for me a little bit longer. It'd be really nice to keep them in my life. What can you do? What can you say to that person? This is the proverb that I want to close with to make that point. So everyone certainly has a why. You've heard a little bit about mine. Everyone certainly has a story to tell. Jim was kind enough to share a quick story with me before we began today of his last 22 years. So there's this Turkish proverb, no road is long with good company. So if you intend to enjoy the road, surround yourself with good company. And then think long and hard about how you advocate for that good company so you can enjoy the road together. Thank you very much.
We have some time for some questions.
Yeah, does your hand go up? I'm glad to answer anything, and I'm going to preface any question with I am not a physician or a medical expert. So if the question is more science-based, I will give you the AHA stance and direct you. Yes.
Well, we have Mark over here who actually runs our Meals on Wheels program that we're involved with for many years. What would be, because it seems that there's like a crossover between some of the things that you're looking at as far as establishing food insecurity and things like that, that Meals on Wheels is already established. And I'm just wondering, what are the qualifications that people would have to meet in order for them to have access to things like blood pressure cuffs and things like that?
Yeah. Generally speaking, you need no medical requirements to fulfill to have access to explaining to someone how to properly use a blood pressure cuff and to screen someone for food insecurity directly. You know, the Heart Association is the convener and the distributor of the science that applies to most of the direct implementation that organizations put out there, whether it be a healthcare facility, a hospital, they're going to use our quality and systems science that we fund, or it be Meals on Wheels, maybe with some of the screening tools that they use. The Heart Association, usually, if we're not the direct funder of the science, we're usually partnered with the American Diabetes Association, the American Medical Association, or the National Institute of Health, as an example. So when it comes to your specific question for folks gaining access to be able to distribute blood pressure cuffs or be able to screen even deeper into what they might do besides distribution, it takes some dollars to be able to stock them up and some light training so that they're empowered. And then the idea is that there's a connection made so that the follow-up comes from someone whose goals are usually focused on the long-term care of this individual, where the person making that connection can just set up the initial contact because they're not the healthcare professional, they're just the good citizen. And we think a lot about that because when you talk about screenings, especially in migrant communities or communities where folks aren't English first language speakers, you know, the folks doing that work are often community health workers and promotores, if anybody's familiar with that term. And most of these folks, they just take general community training. They're not necessarily, you know, in a nursing track or anything like that. So it's pretty open. It's a dialogue and it's some dollars that get that job done. Yes.
I heard a lot about diabetes being very bad for COVID, and a pretty high percentage of people who died from COVID were diabetic. Do you have any numbers on heart disease and COVID?
Yes, not off the top of my head. It's definitely a good follow-up piece, but I can tell you that a disproportionate number of deaths from COVID had an elevated hypertension proclivity, whether they had hypertension or were, you know, pre-exposed to having a comorbidity like that. There's a high correlation. Correlation is not causation, but it is a high correlation. Okay, I'm gonna go there.
So I was interested, you obviously, what is your exercise program that you followed out after that? That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
Heart situation or lung situation.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
I walked a lot of brisk walking for a long time to be able to build up the confidence first, because in my brain, I'm like, I'm never going to do this again. You know, I'm screwed. An absurd amount of walking, which the Heart Association says can easily equal any harder, invigorating running, as long as you get in enough minutes each week. That, coupled with short bouts of strength training, were what helped me build my lung strength back up, so I wasn't having any outsized effects like on the cardiac system. And it was a lot of walking and a lot of short bouts of strength training, like just the easiest, simplest things you could think at home, even squats off the couch and walking up and down stairs. I didn't have stairs. Oh, I walked up the stairs in my building a lot. That's what it was. It wasn't pretty. You didn't want to hear me if you were in one of those doors nearby. But it was a lot of those two things. Swimming can help too, if you're comfortable in the water.
Yeah, you know, as I was listening to the first part of your talk, I'm thinking, gosh, the Heart Association is doing a lot of things. I wonder what their core mission is. And then I think I heard you actually recite the mission. And so it sounds like your mission is just very general. Just improve heart health, improve longevity. I mean, is there a focus that you have in your mind for, you know, what the Heart Association should be doing?
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that question. The Heart Association's mission, I should probably put that in a talk like this directly, is to create a world where we live longer, healthier lives. Full stop, right there, to the point on how vast it is. There are so many factors to our cardiac health that it has to stay that broad. To refine it down, we have 2024 impact goals focused on health equity. That's why I brought that up. Focused on creating more opportunities for folks and specifically lowering blood pressure numbers. You know, over the last 5 to 10 years, the Heart Association has really had the opportunity, because the science has caught up, to talking more and more about our nutrition. Because previously it would have been like blood pressure after you've had a heart attack or stroke. I don't tend to talk about that, but what that care looks like afterwards, that would have been the stump speech. But when I think about it, I do think in the vein of this advocacy piece, what are the little habits that can be routine in your life that will have long-term positive outcomes? And it is going to, for me, circle back on movement, how you eat associated with that movement, and then how you advocate for any youth on that, because it's not about the negativity of a young person playing a lot of video games or not feeling comfortable with like team sports or something like that. It's the general concept of movement, which one of the wonderful things here in this great state that I now am a wonderfully happy resident of is the outdoor opportunities. And to that point, I'm going to go on a 30-second tangent here. You know, the Heart Association leans really heavily into park creation. We know that green spaces, there's robust research that shows green spaces affect one's heart health. We know that complete streets affect opportunities for people if you have access either to ride bikes, to get through crosswalks, that accessibility piece. So we're going to do a lot of work in that sphere. And then we're going to do a lot, honestly, when it comes to pollution or secondhand smoke, like in multi-unit buildings, you know, and there's a lot there. I'm on the movement and the eating piece.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yes.
Have you any information about how somebody who's had COVID several times, how that might affect their heart? I just lost my 43-year-old son-in-law who had it 3 times. But other than that, he was a perfect specimen of health. He exercised, he ate right. But he had COVID 3 times. Do you have any information on that?
Well, first, I'm sorry. Secondly, I think generally that research is still in its infancy from an HA perspective. So the answers, anything that I would know about wouldn't be even 50% towards peer reviewed at this point, you know, with some definitive nature. You know, when I think about advocacy, I think about don't stop following up on that, because you're already not alone, and that club will unfortunately grow. So within your capacity and, you know, what you feel is appropriate, keep following up on that, whether it's with me, you know, your healthcare provider, the institutions in town, because it's a question that we would need funding and focus to stay on, because COVID's not going away. Thank you for sharing that and asking. Yeah, and on camera, I'm all over the place here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.